Welcome back. All right, so we've talked a lot about the free agent signings and everything else that's going on. So here's your four divisions, the same as they were for the last video I did, where I had all 32 teams on the board. 32 is such a nice round number too. So going through where we're at right now, and which teams are likely in the upgrade category, and which teams look like they've downgraded. It's tough. This is actually my second go through where I've gone through and gone, nah, and I've started second guessing a bit here. So we'll go through each team and I'll explain, and then if I can't get through this one, I'll go have myself a cider. Maybe I'll go sit in the pool for a while, and then I'll come back and try it again. We just have a backyard pool. It's not like an in-ground pool or anything. I don't make in-ground pool money. So yeah, Arizona, I'm going to go ahead and say, and I don't think Coyotes fans are going to be upset with this, that they've downgraded since the season ended. But this is on purpose. This is because they're tearing it down, and they're clearly, they might be looking at their division and saying we're not going to compete in this division anyways. They might be looking at their bottom line and saying we've lost money for too long, and to turn this around, we're going to get younger. We're going to have the cheaper players as a result, and maybe we get Bedard or Wright in the draft at some point soon. So, yeah, Arizona for me, it's an overall downgrade, but it's on purpose. Right? This is not oh no, what are they doing? Chicago, yes, I think Chicago has upgraded their team. However, I think that the expectation that now they're a contender that I've seen from some, and fans do this. The off season is this time of eternal happiness and optimism for fans, where it's like, look at what we've done, yay, we're champions now, and it's hard. A couple years ago, I was dealing with Jersey fans who felt that New Jersey had done a great job, and then it just didn't work out. And so you make these moves in the offseason hoping it improves things. I think Chicago's improved. I still think that Colorado is the contender in this division. I think Nashville's going to be better than they get credit for right now. I think Dallas is going to bounce back from a down season. Minnesota, it hinges on Kaprizov, and Winnipeg and St. Louis are going to be in the mix too. So Chicago will get better, but this is a tough division. Colorado, I think things are pretty much the same. Losing Grubauer was big. Adding Kemper makes me want to say it may very well be a downgrade if Kemper gets hurt. However, Grubauer got hurt, and they were still okay. So they're able to adapt to whoever's in net, and they're still able to put up wins. Seemingly, it doesn't matter who is tending the goal for them. Dallas, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Dallas is a better team right now than they were at the end of the season. I think the additions are good. I like Hakanpää a lot, and I know that I may be in the minority there. I think that at $1.5 million, I think there's no risk, and I think it's a good pickup. And I think Dallas has a pretty good team. That underachieved this past season due to injuries were a part of it, and just they couldn't win in overtime. So these are things that you look at, and it kind of makes you want to bang your head against the wall. But still, Dallas should get better next year, and I like the additions they've made in the offseason thus far. I like the Suter contract for now. For later, it's going to age badly, but it's still for now, right? Minnesota's a question mark. Minnesota's a question mark because if they don't keep Kaprizov, if he ends up in the KHL, that's a massive downgrade for the Minnesota Wild. And that will take the air out of the sails for the Minnesota fan base, and just in general, that would be worst case scenario, right? And the longer that he's out there, and the longer we hear all these rumors and discussions and speculations, yeah, this is not great. So the sooner they can get Kaprizov signed, I think the better, because I can't grade him right now. Nashville, I think for Nashville, I think they're going to be better than what people are expecting. I know they've lost Yarncroke. I know that some of their players are a year older, but everybody's a year older than they were a year ago. But still, my point is, I still like some of the young players. I like Ellie Tolvanen took that next step last year, this year. And Saros proved he could be a good starter in the league. I think Riddick's going to have a bounce-back year. So I still think Nashville's in the hunt. Now, trading out Ellis, it's a bold move, but they've got a very deep blue line, and then this gives Dante Fabro a chance to step up. Every time they've traded out a defenseman or they've lost a defenseman to free agency, they've managed to find another really good top 4 guy or somebody just makes that next step. So David Poyle's been good with that. St. Louis, I'm going to say St. Louis right now is kind of a wash. And St. Louis is one that's kind of giving me a bit of a headache to do this video because there are losses here. I think losing Dunn off the blue line, I think that kind of hurts. I think losing Hoffman hurts a bit on the power play. However, they've added Saad and they added Buchnevich. So, right? I think for St. Louis, I think it's about even. I think St. Louis absolutely can get back into, say, third spot in that division. That sound good? They'll want to avoid Colorado in the first round is my guess, but we'll see how things turn out. Winnipeg, I think Winnipeg's gotten better. I like what Winnipeg's done with their blue line. I like it a lot. I think they've done a good job of improving the weakness they had all throughout last season that I think was kind of exposed in that round against Montreal. So now they've fixed that. Moving over to the Pacific, Anaheim. Anaheim is right about the same as they were last year, which is by design. They've got kids coming in. They've added some depth guys for free agency. The plan is, I think, one more year of relying on the kids a little bit, and then next summer they may go out, try to make a splash in free agency like the Kings have done this year, with the expectation that the 2023 playoffs would be there for Anaheim. Calgary. For Calgary, Zadorov's great and all. He's not Giordano. And so losing Giordano to me is a huge loss for the Calgary Flames. They're still a decent team here. I do like the Vladar pickup a lot. I do. And if you want to say, well, that's because you're a Boston fan. Damn rights. And I want to see Vladar succeed. So, but overall, I think that Calgary, minus Giordano, even though he's older, that's a huge loss for the Flames, and we'll see how it turns out for them this year. Edmonton, I'm going to say about the same with Edmonton. I like the moves up front. I think their blue line, it's questionable, and we'll see. We'll see how things turn out, but I think it's questionable right now on the blue line. I do like what they've done up front. Of course, their goaltending is exactly the same, and we've all had discussions on that. And again, the disrespect of Mike Smith continues. Smith had an excellent year last year for the Edmonton Oilers, and he's not the reason that they lost in the playoffs, but still, that criticism is going to be out there when you lose as Edmonton did, right? So, trying to add more scoring depth, they've done that. Was it at the expense of their blue line? Maybe. This might be a team that has to win games 8-6. They may very well be a team that has to win games 8-6. The LA Kings, I like what LA's done. I like adding Edler. I like adding Deno. I think the Kings have done well. And, of course, you've got the kids coming up that look pretty good. Byfield had a good debut towards the end of the season. And so we'll see if that continues. We'll see if Velarde continues his upward trajectory. Maybe he does move to the wing and play with Dano, which could be a huge boost for his defensive game. And just overall, I like what the Kings have done. San Jose, I would say it stays about the same for San Jose because really when you look at the Sharks, their goaltending was a problem last year. They've replaced both goaltenders. I thought Kozanosh was good, but Aiden Hill I think is a little bit of an upgrade. Is Reimer going to be solid this year? He had a rough go of it last year in Carolina. We'll see. And their forward group, they've added a little bit of depth here and there. But I think for San Jose, I think it's about the same as last year. Seattle, they're not applicable. They didn't have any players last year. So, yes, I could put an up arrow, but that would be a sarcastic up arrow because they didn't have anybody last year. So, have they improved? I guess. They weren't a team last year. So, there you go. Vancouver, yes, Vancouver, I think, has improved. And that's where the question becomes how much. Much like Chicago in the Central, for Vancouver, the question is going to be how much have they improved. And the OEL question, that huge $7 million a year question, can he get back to being the defenseman he was when he got that contract? And if the answer to that is yes, it's worth it, great move. If the answer to that is no, it becomes a whole other conversation altogether. So yeah, Vancouver, some fascinating moves being made. I think that they've improved. Going from Holtby to Halak, that should be an improvement as well. And we should be able to see Demko getting probably more comfortable nights off than he got last season. For Vegas, I'm going to go with a downgrade. Now, here's the thing with Vegas. They trade out Cody Glass in exchange for Nolan Patrick. Clearly, they soured on Cody Glass, but they keep trading out these young players. And then the other part too, that for me with Vegas, it's not just that they trade Fleury and they get nothing back. It's that there was a feeling you had with the Vegas team in 2017-2018 that every year they get further away from. So even with this down arrow, they're the best team in the Pacific. They're to me, they're the best team in the Pacific, and I'm not sure how close it is. Edmonton will do their best to get close, but I think Vegas should be able to win this division by double digits in points, right? But that being said, I do think they lose a little bit more of that identity every year. I think they go more towards that skill game, and so you see a drop in the number of hits per game. You see they're still the puck control is still there, but it feels more like they're going towards that finesse game. And it reminds me of what Toronto's been trying to do for the last 4 years approximately. And I do wonder if Vegas is going to win that cup that they so desperately want when they keep changing up the chemistry in that locker room. And I think they lose something. And again, sometimes it's not going to show up on various charts or in the stats, but just the team, it feels like they lose a little bit more of that identity every year. Boston, losing Krejci is huge. And they didn't have anybody signed to replace Krejci in case he didn't come back. They're still going to be a playoff team. This division may very well be... I mean, the Pacific is going to be seen as the weakest, but the Atlantic overall may end up being kind of a weak division this year as well. Especially if Boston does take a bit of a nosedive in the standings. Losing Lauzon, he only played 41 games. He had 8 points. But I think the Bruins' depth on the blue line, and I think that's taken a bit of a hit. Keeping Taylor Hall's great, but that depth down the middle, that needs to be fixed. Buffalo, if possible. I don't know how it's possible that Buffalo, as bad as they were last year, and as horrible as the record was, I look at them now and I say, all right, so they traded Reinhart. They lost Ullmark as a free agent. They should have traded Ullmark at the deadline. When they kept Ullmark, I thought, okay, so they're going to keep him. When they protected him from Seattle, I thought, okay, so they've got to be working on a contract with him. He's in Boston now. Buffalo is worse than they were at the end of the season. So Ristolainen's gone. Reinhart's gone. They've lost Ullmark. I don't see how it can be argued this team's better or even as good as the one that finished the season. Now, it's possible that coming out of training camp with a whole bunch of different players at different positions, maybe they start the season pretty well. Maybe they surprise some people. But for right now, Detroit, they're better. Detroit is better. And so for people who want to see, Shane Wright and Connor Bedard end up in Detroit uniforms, not so much. Detroit, I don't think that Steve Yzerman's overly concerned with getting that number one pick. I think you've got a lot of good players coming up, a lot of good young players. That prospect pool is fantastic in Detroit, and I think they're going to start making improvements this year. I do. I like the moves they've made as well. Adding Stevens today. I think there's just some really good value additions being made by the Detroit Red Wings. Florida. I think for Florida so far it's been a bit of a wash. They lose Drieger, but they've got Spencer Knight, so they can afford to lose Drieger. I think there would have been more panic about losing Drieger if not for Spencer Knight showing both regular season and playoffs. He's a pretty good goaltender. So for Florida, they lose Wenberg, but they add Reinhart. There's definitely been an argument about whether or not Bill Zito is underappreciated as a GM. I think he's done a very good job, and I think that he's put together a pretty good team, and I think Florida's going to be in contention next year. Montreal, it has been a downgrade for Montreal. They've made some smart signings, but losing Danault hurts. Weber being out for likely this entire season, maybe his career's done, that hurts. There are a lot of things with Montreal that, Montreal's going to have probably a rough time of it. It could be a rough year for Montreal fans. And yet they keep Price and Allen, so that goaltending tandem should be able to keep them in some games. Ottawa's going to get better. And I like the moves Ottawa's made in the offseason. I like that they traded Dadonov, that they realized this was a bad fit, and they traded him off to Vegas. And we'll see how everything turns out for them. I think that Ottawa has a decent chance of pushing for a playoff spot. I don't want to say they'll get in, but if you look at this division, obviously Tampa, two back-to-back cup winners, they are definitely a playoff team, right? Florida should be a playoff team too, so that's two. I would say that of the teams on the board, Boston should still be a playoff team. If they replace Krejci, that helps. You have to replace Krejci. And then Toronto should be number 4 or number 3. I think both teams in Florida are probably 1, 2 in the division. Toronto should be, I would think, number 3. But I don't think Ottawa's going to be that far out. I really don't think Ottawa's going to be that far out. They had a very good second half. And because people weren't paying attention to the north, south of the border here, they didn't see how well Ottawa was playing, or they just shrugged it off and said, well, it doesn't matter. We'll see what happens this year. Tampa, it is a downgrade for Tampa, but there's still a good chance that they end up winning another cup. When you've won back-to-back cups, you're going to be a favorite the following season. So yeah, Tampa Bay, they have a decent shot here. Tampa Bay is looking at losing that whole line there. You've got Gaudreau, Coleman, and Gord, but Corey Perry's a good addition. There are other good additions there as well, and cheap additions. And I don't think they're done, but also they always have guys coming up from Syracuse who are ready. They always have guys who come up that are ready. Ross Colton showed this year that that's still the case. So I would expect to see some rookies come in and play for Tampa Bay who've bided their time, and now they're going to get their chance. And if history's taught us anything, it's do not underestimate the players coming up from Tampa Bay's minor league system. Toronto. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think Toronto's better. And I say go out on a limb because I have seen people taking victory laps on the Leafs, and they're not going to make the playoffs, and what are they doing? Mrazek is a good goaltender, so as long as he can stay healthy, I think that's an upgrade over the goaltending they got from Anderson last year. Mrazek and Campbell will be 1-2, and whichever goaltender is playing well is going to be the starting goaltender for that period of time. Campbell went on a very nice run. I don't know that Campbell replicates that run, but I don't know that he necessarily has to. I think he can play about that well, and they'll still experience good, some good results. I really, really like the Bunting addition for them. And so I think that Toronto's depth gets better, and that's been the big issue. You shut down their big names, they don't have anything else. That's been the issue for Toronto for a long time. And I think that's gotten better. I think they've improved a little bit in the offseason. So I still see Toronto as a playoff team. When I see people saying, Toronto's not even going to be a playoff team, I immediately look at that and I go, that's kind of a troll. That can't be legit. Can't believe that. Carolina, getting off to the Metro. Carolina, I think it's a downgrade for Carolina. They lose Dougie Hamilton. They add Anderson and Ranta as goaltenders, both of them coming off of injury-riddled, poor seasons statistically. We'll see how it works out in Carolina. They worked magic to turn Mrazek around. They helped Reimer when Reimer's career was at a down, really, really low point. So maybe Don Waddell knows something. Maybe he says, you know what, our goaltending coach is good enough, and we can work some magic. We'll bring these guys back and fix it. But still, losing Nedeljkovic to Detroit is a head-scratcher. And it's part of the reason why Detroit gets that up arrow, because it's Nedeljkovic, right? No offense to Bernier, but Nedeljkovic is younger, and yeah, we'll see. Columbus. Columbus, honestly, they weren't a playoff team. They move on from Tortorella. I'm going to say they're about even with last year so far. There's still rumors about whether or not Elvis is going to get traded, but if they trade Merzlikins, we'll see what happens. Losing Seth Jones hurts, but I thought they did well in that trade. And I think that Columbus needed to change some stuff. I think picking up Voracek for Atkinson probably gets them more points now. And Laine has to bounce back. Has to, on some level, bounce back. And yet last summer I thought Skinner should have some kind of a bounce back, and he didn't. So we'll see. But Laine and Skinner are not the same age. They're not the same player. And Laine has to have some kind of a bounce back this year. New Jersey's definitely gotten better. Adding Dougie Hamilton, adding Jonathan Bernier, these are really smart moves. New Jersey is going to be in the mix. They're going to be a better team than last year. Playoffs, that may depend on the health and progression of guys like Hischier, and definitely on Jack Hughes. If Jack Hughes can take that next step offensively, and he has all the skill in the world to make it work, then yeah, New Jersey could very well be a surprise team. And again, you've now got Blackwood and you've got Bernier. That's a pretty good tandem. The Islanders. The Islanders, it's a downgrade for now. You get the feeling Lou Lamoriello's working the phones, and something's going to change. But for right now, it is a down arrow for the New York Islanders because they haven't signed anybody. It's just that's how that works. They've lost Zajac, they've lost Palmieri, they lost Eberle in the expansion draft, Cizikas, and they might bring some of these guys back on contracts. But as I record this on July 30th, they haven't. New York Rangers. The Rangers, I'm going to say about even. Now, I still think the Rangers have a chance of being a playoff team this season. I know that the acquisitions of guys like Reeves and Blais and losing Buchnevich has got a lot of people very upset. I understand what the Rangers are doing on some level because I think there are a lot of skilled forwards and I think they felt they needed to be able to play that physical game, which Blais can, and Reeves definitely can. And so I kind of like what the Rangers have done, but I can also understand the concerns with what they've done as well. So I'm going to say things are about even for me with the Rangers, but the overall picture for them to make the playoffs this year is not nearly as bad as you might think if you're reading reactions on the internet right now. The Islanders should be a pretty good team and in the playoffs. Carolina should be pretty good in the playoffs. And Pittsburgh and Washington are going to be the sexy picks to stay in the playoffs, but I think the Rangers are right there. Philly. I like what Philly's done on the blue line. I think their blue line has improved. For that reason, I'm going to give them an up arrow, but next to them. And every other year, they miss the playoffs. Every other year, they make the playoffs. So when Philly makes the playoffs in 2022, and we're all surprised by it, we shouldn't be surprised by it. This is just how this works. And last year, I thought Philly had found the recipe for prolonged success. Nope. But I'm going to go ahead and say they should bounce back this year and have their good year before next year's the bad year yet again. So, yeah, Philadelphia, I give them an up arrow. Pittsburgh. It is hard to argue Pittsburgh's gotten better. Just thinking about, well, McCann and Tanev are out. It's hard to argue Pittsburgh's better. So I'm going to go with the down arrow on this one, and I think there are some weaknesses on this team that I don't know that they've fixed. The goaltending is still concerning to me. And I understand that there are some going, well, no, it'll be fine. Jari's still young. He can bounce back. And he can. But there were definitely some flaws on this team that allowed the Islanders to kind of pick them apart. And I'm not sure that those flaws have been fixed. And then you lose McCann, you lose Tanev. And I wonder about their depth and whether or not they're going to be able to make this work. Because they've been at the top for so long that they do have kind of a shallow pool of prospects. And we'll see how that affects them moving forward. For the Capitals, I'm going to say the Capitals right now for me, I'll say about the same. I don't see a reason to upgrade or downgrade the Washington Capitals. I think that, they didn't end up having to lose anybody that they couldn't afford to lose to the expansion draft. In fact, they got him back. They got Vanacek back. So, yeah, they didn't lose anything there. They still haven't made the Kuznetsov deal, if that deal actually happens. And, for me, the Capitals are probably right about the same. So, if I had to just spitballing pick right now, and I'm not being held to this because I'll do the season previews at some point, which I don't know how you predict all this. These teams haven't played a full season in these divisions in a while. So I'll say that in the Central, the 4 teams, and I'll just say 4 teams in each division that I think will be the top 4. Colorado, St. Louis, Minnesota if they keep Kaprizov, and probably Winnipeg. If Minnesota can't keep Kaprizov or replace him, Nashville I would think gets that 4th spot. But, it's tough because Dallas, there's a lot riding on guys coming back from injury, and Chicago's going to be better. Looking at the Pacific, if I had to name a top 4, Vegas is top. The Oilers, I think, are in the top 4. I honestly think Seattle's probably going to be top 4 in that division, and I think we're going to have a whole big discussion about expansion again, even though it's likely the last ever expansion. And then that last spot, probably a 3-way race, I would think, between Calgary, LA, and Vancouver. That's at least that's just me spitballing off the top of my head. I think that's where we end up. Seattle still has a ton of cap space. I think they're going to add more. And then in the Atlantic, the top four: Tampa, Florida, Boston, and Toronto would be my picks there. And then in the Metro, Carolina's still a playoff team, I think, even though they've made some questionable moves, at least questionable to most. I'm sure that they have information, they know what they're doing, but it just looks questionable to those of us on the outside looking in. But I'll say Carolina, the Islanders for Barry Trotz reasons, Pittsburgh and Washington, sure. But the Rangers, the Flyers, this division's going to be tough. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. And again, that's not how it's finally going to end up. I'm going to go through each roster, and I'm going to find a way to try to figure out who I'm actually picking to make the playoffs when I start doing previews in a couple of weeks. And yeah, previews are starting in a couple of weeks because the season won't be that far behind. And I also try to make sure that I do my previews before all the annuals come out. The hockey annuals, which are usually around, middle of and late August. So I make sure I'm doing my predictions first, so that I'm not influenced by other publications, or so that people don't go out and get like the hockey news or the sports forecaster and go, well, all your playoff picks are exactly the same as theirs, so you just copied theirs. I got that the first year, so not this year. All right. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happen upon this video. There you go, 32 teams. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.